Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. If you ask someone which king of Judah was the most encouraging to them, I'm pretty sure very few people would say Manasseh. Just the very name Manasseh brings up uh, to the mind a person who was very rebellious against God. And we read about this in 2 Chronicles chapter 33, where we read about the fact that even though his dad Hezekiah was such a faithful king, followed in the ways of the Lord, Manasseh went in the complete opposite direction. It talks about how he made his sons pass through the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom. He practiced witchcraft, used divination, practiced sorcery, and dealt with mediums and spiritists. And it says that he did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. And as you start to read chapter 33, you don't really see all that much encouragement there, especially given the fact that Hezekiah had brought Judah through such major reforms and basically got them back on the right track. And now Manasseh is coming in and really just messing everything up. And it might seem a bit discouraging, but I find the story of Manasseh actually very encouraging. Not because he was rebelling and that he got Judah back off track again, but because of the fact that he shows us that no one is beyond coming back to the Lord. Because as evil as Manasseh was, and all the wickedness that he did for decades, he turns around. He has a prodigal son moment where he's taken into captivity by the Assyrian king. He's placed, he's led by a hook in his nose all the way to Babylon. He's thrown in prison, and he has a prodigal son moment where he says, you know what, I'm going to turn my heart back to the Lord. It says in verse 12, when he was in distress, he entreated the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. And the story ends with him actually being able to go back into Judah, into Jerusalem, and he actually turns things around and leads a little bit of a reform there in Judah and actually builds up Jerusalem and Judah. And so it ends on a good note that this wicked king, this guy who had really done things that just angered the Lord extremely, still found grace in the eyes of the Lord when he turned his heart back to him. And so this encourages us in two ways. One, it encourages us when we think about ourselves, when we look at our lives and we recognize all the things that we've done that are contrary to the will of God. When we blunder, when we mess up, when we fumble the ball, when we really just get everything wrong and we find ourselves drifting away from God, there's hope. We realize through the story of Manasseh that there's hope, that if we will do as he did, when we are in our distress, if we'll just entreat the Lord and humble ourselves greatly before him, return to him in repentance, that the story doesn't have to end there, that the Lord can bring renewal and restoration into our lives. And so it's encouraging when we take this and personalize it for ourselves. But it's also encouraging as we think about other people. There might be people in our lives that we love very much and that we care for very much. And yet, when we look at their lives, we don't really see much ray of hope of them ever turning to the Lord, of ever, really giving their lives to God. And we might begin to give up on them and say, well, it's too late for them, or they're too far gone. Well, this story tells us that if Manasseh can turn back to the Lord, then anyone can turn back to the Lord. And it encourages us to keep praying, to keep working, to keep speaking into people's lives, to continue to be a good influence, a good example to people, with the hopes that even though it may not look like it now, one day they might actually turn back to the Lord. One day they might actually entreat the Lord and humble themselves before him. It might take them being placed in a situation of distress. It might be that the Lord has to bring them into a dark place in order for them to come to themselves. But it's never too late. As long as there's breath in their lungs, as long as they're alive, we can continue to pray for them, continue to labor in love over them, and with the hope that perhaps they'll have a change of heart and maybe they'll turn their lives to the Lord. So as we read the story of Manasseh in our reading today, let's not think of it as a discouraging story, but as an encouraging story, both for ourselves and knowing that we can always turn back to the Lord when we mess up, but also in connection to the people that we love and knowing that they too can turn back to the Lord and find grace and forgiveness before the Lord in that way. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.